Hello everyone and welcome back. So now that we've got all of the resources set up, it's time to move over into the StencilBrush implementation, and this will be part one. Lee?
Right, all right. Let's first start off by cleaning up some of this stuff. We got too much stuff open. So I'm going to close down everything but the terrain sculptor, the config file, and I need to grab the stencil brush. So we'll open up the stencil brush. Now our stencil brush has a little bit of stuff inside of it, mostly being this icon being loaded and instance set to this. I have since first recording this gone through and changed my mind about this instance part. So that's going bye-bye. We're going to get rid of that. So we can get rid of all of that stuff. Actually, let me think about that. Can I do that safely? Because I'm looking at my implementation going, no, yeah, I made all that stuff static. And then I realized that this is based off a brush here. And brush stuff is not static here. This presents an interesting little problem. All right, so disregard what I just said about getting rid of the instance stuff. We're still going to need that. This is what happens when you change stuff up too much.
On the fly.
Yes. I do that a lot. All right, so we've got our initial stuff cleaned up. Our max brush count is 19, not 18, so we'll adjust that. And we're going to need some more stuff in here. What are we going to need? Well, we've already got the initial part of the CurrentStencilID, and I believe when I created this, I mentioned we're going to modify this particular property. So we're going to go ahead and convert this. Will it let me to it? Yep, there it is. To property with backing field. All right, so we're going to adjust this to a property that has a backing field. We're going to leave everything pretty much the way it would normally be with the exception of the setter. The setter we need to do some weird stuff with. We're going to come back to this in a sec. Now, if I scroll down, we have to set our icon. So in our stencil brush, and let me make sure I've got everything set up the way I need it. So stencil brush, we're going to need to specify our icon. So we're going to take our icon, we're going to create a new texture 2D for it. This is going to be 512 by 512. Texture format of RGB alpha 32, same reasons as the noise brush because we're going to need alpha on it. And we don't need bitmap, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. We're going to set our icon to a filter mode of point. And we're going to set its wrap mode to be clamp. So that will handle this part of it. Now this will, inside here, we're going to set our current stencil ID equal to our current stencil ID, which is basically going to be defaulted to a value of 1 here. And the reason we're doing this is I want current stencil ID to be set to 1, but because we have to do some calculations inside of the setter, I want to make sure that those get called the moment the brush is created. And then if we do the second overload, we're going to set our current stencil ID to be equal to stencil ID. So this will make sure that everything that we do inside of here is taken care of. Now, what do we need to do in here? Well, we're going to take our current stencil ID and set it to be value. We need to do a couple of checks. We want to make sure that our current stencil ID, if it's less than 0, we're going to set it to be whatever the max brush count is -1. Or the, yeah, oh, well, that's max stencil count. I named it differently here than what I've got here. So max stencil count, then -1. So this is to make sure that we don't get off by 1 errors, because there's 19 brushes, but our stencil, our alphas, the stencils are numbered 0 through 18. So this is just compensating for that. And then else, if our current stencil, wow, no typing for me today, current stencil ID is greater than our max stencil count -1, then we're going to set our current stencil ID to be equal to 0. This is going to provide wrapping, because we're going to implement some hotkeys and eventually GUI elements that are going to allow us to increment or cycle through our stencils by incrementing and decrementing the current stencil ID. Each time that does that, it's going to load in the new stencil, calculate out a new icon for it, and apply those changes, but we want to make sure we don't go out of the bounds of the available stencils. So that's why that code is there. All right, then we need to go ahead and implement a new method that we don't have yet. So I'm going to minimize these. Come down here. We're going to make a private void update stencil, and let's see, update stencil and icon. Now this is where we're going to do all of our update information, so I'm going to copy this, go over here, and then update our stencil and icon, and public static, which is why we need to have our instance. So instance dot. So this will be our call in here. And what do you want? Method update stencil and icon can be made static. Can it?
Well, yeah,
give it a sec. It's like going, really? Can it? Yeah, give it a sec, and we'll see if you still feel that way. I just wanted to see what the green was all about. So what we're going to do here is we need to go and get our stencil. That's going to be resources.load, and we're going to find our value from string.format, and if you remember, our values are always, or our stencils are always named alpha with a number at the end of them. So we're going to use alpha in the squiggly brackets 0, comma, our current stencil ID to string. That will take care of that part, except I need one more set of brackets. And then we need to cast this as a texture 2D. Did it again. All right. And it's also now telling me that this can't be made static, which it's not going to be able to. All right, the next part of this is going to be iterating through all of the pixels and adjusting them. So we're going to do a for, and yeah, this is going to, I did it again. All right. There we go. So we're going to start with Y, and we're going to go based off our icon.height. And we'll do another for. This will be X, and this will be based off of icon.width. And get rid of the second set of brackets. Now what we're going to do is make a variable called color. This is going to be what we get from stencil.getPixels, or getPixel, because we're going to query one pixel at a time. So we're going to get the X and Y pixel, or the pixel at X and Y coordinate. We're going to take that color and we're going to assign a new color, and we're going to pick it out based off of, we're going to force it essentially to use one of the channels as its alpha, because right now I know that those alphas don't have an alpha channel in them. They're all black and white images, which means their red, green, and blue values are all the same, but their alpha channel is all set to 1. And I want the icon to have an alpha so that it looks transparent on our projector that we're using for our sculpting tool. Otherwise, what we'd end up seeing is a square stencil, or a square projector icon for our sculpting tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set our color to be color.red for all of them. So this will effectively be adding an alpha channel that looks exactly like the red channel, but it's also hard setting the green and blue channels to be the same as red, which in this case will effectively work exactly the same. Now we could bypass this entire step if we were to make sure that our alphas had alpha channels on them, and then we wouldn't have to go through and manually set the alpha channel. Once we've calculated the new color, we need to do set pixel X by, or well, helps if I put them in parentheses. So X by Y by color. So we set that. That says all of our colors. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and say icon.apply. This will apply the changes that we make on the icon. So this will update our stencils. So let's go through and make sure that that gives me all the values that I need for this one, which it does. Now, how do I want to handle this? Let's not worry about that at the moment yet. Let's go ahead, and in the next video we'll implement the sample part. And then I'll put in the code that we need for cycling through the different stencils, because there's no real point in putting in the code yet for cycling if we can't see the results on the screen.
Yeah.
So we'll do that separately. So we'll
Okay,
go ahead and
awesome.
build this. And we'll end the video here, because right now, until I get the sampling put in place, there's nothing to show.
Right. All right, well, that'll wrap up this video. We'll catch you guys in the next. Thanks a lot.